Okay, so why don't we start? Let me introduce myself, and my colleague will introduce himself. I am Dr. Garfinkel, and I am very happy to be here. I was here last year. And I want to know a little bit of his background. I am a professor of neuropsychology technology, and can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm a professor at New York City College of Technology, and I presented last year, and I'm presenting again this year. A little bit different than the presentation that you heard last year. As a matter of fact, just by a show of hands, how many people? Oh, I'm sorry.
To make an announcement.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sorry about that.
So I just wanted to remind folks that if you haven't been scanned, that you should have your name tag scanned in order to receive credit. So the volunteer should be right over to the side if you haven't been scanned already. Thank you.
Okay. So, anyways, how many people were here to hear us speak last year, just by a show of hands? Okay, a few people. Good thing is that you don't usually remember much after a few days. So I could say the same thing as I did last year, and nobody would be disappointed. But it is good to kind of get a sense of where people are at, so Dr. Kaplan and myself can hear how we're going to do this presentation. The other thing I'd like to ask, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kaplan to introduce himself, is how many people are engaged in some kind of meditative practice at this point? Okay, good. Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll all want to engage in some kind of meditative practice. How many people are doing mindfulness meditation? Okay, a few of you. How many people do it more than 3 times a day? Thank God. Otherwise, I'd have to say you're addicted. And then we have another problem. Okay, but in all seriousness, how many people do mindfulness, let's say, every day? Pretty much. Okay, and how many people do it, let's say, a couple times a week? Okay. Anybody do it once a year? Okay. Well, we did have somebody who raised their hand. I'm going to share the implication of practice with you in a few moments, but I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Dr. Van Kaplan, who will introduce himself, and we'll get the ball rolling.
Thank you very much, Dr. Germer. Just as an introduction, I'm trained in clinical psychology. Actually, see a gentleman in the room, Mark Handelman, right? My pre-doctoral internship was at the Hamilton Madison House, so welcome. But I'm trained in clinical psychology. I'm also a professor at the College of Staten Island, so I'll share some of the experiences with you from that journey. So in terms of this lecture, I'd like to draw attention to the keynote. And the keynote said something that I believe is quite powerful. The keynote said that individuals with substance use disorders tend to be hypercritical. They're sensitive to criticism, they're sensitive to compliments, they're skeptical of compliments. That is a way of being. When we look at individuals who have a substance use disorder, we like to describe them or explain the rationale as a person who is emotionally sunburnt. So, very sensitive to criticism. Today's lecture is about rewriting the message, giving tools and strategies to a person who has a substance use disorder that they can see more positive self-image, better self-esteem. We're going to give several strategies that maybe you are familiar with, maybe this is the first time you've heard, that will be useful to yourself and to your client. And then it's very important to understand what we're talking about today has a neurobiological impact as well. So I'm going to start by talking about the neurobiology of addiction. Then we'll go into our lecture. Then we'll go back into neurobiology and show how this is effective at rewriting the brain. So those are the objectives. Okay, so let's start with the neurocircuitry of addiction. Oh, actually, Dr. Garfinkel felt that it would be useful to show you the sad intersection of fame, drugs, and death. So let's actually start with the, okay.
Since we're going to be talking about compassion and gratitude, this is a very short clip, and I thought it would be appropriate to stand and to begin to feel the sense of compassion for the clip that you're going to see. It's only 3 minutes, but it's very powerful. So if you could stand, and again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to be seated. We'll come back to that when we get to the compassion part, but I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kaplan, who's going to talk about the neuroscience behind addiction.
There's one way to put a room to sleep. In all seriousness, I love neuroscience. My master's is in neuropsychology, but I know that I need to be neuroscience light. So I am not going to spend very much time on this to get to the important work that we have. But how many of you are familiar with the neurocircuitry of addiction? Right? I see a little less than half of you. When we look at the neurocircuitry of addiction, it's referred to as the mesolimbic cortical dopamine system. Now, the reality is that there is more than dopamine at play, but the primary neurotransmitter that we're going to focus on today is dopamine. There are many others. I'll go into why we're focusing on it, but in terms of addiction, it starts in the ventral tegmental area. That's in the midbrain. So meso being middle. So mesolimbic. We move up to the nucleus accumbens. Does anyone know where the nucleus accumbens is? All right, you. So that actually happens to be in the hypothalamus. So that the hypothalamus is one of the brain structures in the limbic system. And then we have the prefrontal cortex, which is actually the cortical piece. So when we say mesolimbic cortical system, we actually go in that order. We start in the midbrain, move up to the limbic system, then up to the cortex. You'll notice from 1 to 2, you have primarily dopamine. And I'm going to talk about what that does in a minute, but you also see a reverberating circuit between the nucleus accumbens and the prefrontal cortex. So what do these various structures do? So when we talk about the ventral tegmental area, pathway to the nucleus accumbens, that's what tells us this feels good. When a person uses drugs or alcohol, they're using it for a reason. And it's not just necessarily for masking. Sometimes they're using it for pure pleasure. Things feel good. So that part of the pathway is associated with the goodness factor. When we move up from the nucleus accumbens to the prefrontal cortex, there's another piece that is associated with remembering that it feels good. So it's the memory of it feeling good, which is going to result in seeking that. There's a very familiar law. It's called the law of adaptive hedonism. The law of adaptive hedonism suggests, by nature, we seek pleasure and we want to avoid pain. That's by nature. And this pathway is a pleasure pathway in the brain. So many of you may have heard the mesolimbic dopamine system as referred to as a pleasure pathway. So let's go back. In terms of the dopamine pathway that we're talking about, it affects our perception of pleasure. It affects our motivation to engage in rewarding activities. And it's related to reward motor function learning. As I talked to you about memory, but learning and memory are intrinsically tied. But most importantly for us, when we talk about the role of the mesolimbic cortical dopamine system, this is a pathway that we see as the neural pathway of addiction, right? So we're going to put a focus on dopamine, but there are many other neurotransmitters. I like to talk about the big six and then the others, right? So you'll see acetylcholine, norepinephrine, dopamine, 5-HT, which is serotonin, glutamate, GABA. Then we have opioids, cannabinoids, and histamine as the primary factors that most of the drugs we think about either activate these intrinsic systems or they inhibit them. So they're going to mimic it or inhibit it. Now, let's look at the effect of these. Can you see the various neurotransmitters that are associated with happiness? Serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, right? So these are the three neurotransmitters that are associated with happiness. For some, drugs provide happiness. It's a crazy idea to say that. But it provides a respite, it can provide happiness. We need to find a way to activate these neurotransmitters without drugs. Right? So that's really the goal of today. And we're going to focus on dopamine. But Dr. Garfinkel and I are actually working on the research base for norepinephrine and serotonin as well. Perhaps that could be packaged in a different talk or paper. Okay, so let's ask the question. Dr. Garfinkel mentioned, what is mindfulness? So we're going to talk about mindfulness, self-compassion, but let's pull back a little bit and talk about mindfulness in general. So mindfulness is described in many different ways. So here is John Kabat-Zinn. By the way, this is off of our previous presentation. So if you were here, I apologize. There's about 5 or 6 slides that are redundant. But John Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Right? So there are 3 factors: attention, intention, and attitude. And this is what it means to be mindful. Mindful is not being on autopilot, right? This is actually one of the challenges that we face. Particularly in the Northeast, we are pulled in so many directions. And many times we go on autopilot. Mindfulness is the antithesis of going on autopilot. It's being present in the moment. It's also the opposite of multitasking. Now, there's great research by cognitive psychologists on the effects of multitasking. It's ineffective. It doesn't work. So mindfulness forces us to do things one at a time with intent. It's also not pushing away or suppressing an experience, right? There are many times that we're going to talk about traumatic experiences, and people naturally want to push them beneath the surface. They naturally do not want to deal with them. But bringing it to the presence of mind, bringing it to your conscious experience, right? But not clinging to the experience. You have to bring it to the forefront without clinging to it. It's related to, but not synonymous with mentalizing. So people, you don't want to get caught up in cognition. So it's also not positive thinking, although when we get to, you should all have a gratitude list. That's going to be a piece at the end of the presentation. We will talk about positive psychology, gratitude as an extension of this work. But it isn't just positive thinking. It's not just a relaxation technique. We're going to talk about breathing, and people think of breathing as progressive muscle relaxation. This is more than just a progressive muscle relaxation. It's not going into a trance, and we're not asking you to clear your mind, but be aware of what you're thinking. So, meditation is not the escape from life, but preparation for really being in life. We want to pull you away from being detached and bring you to the present state of mind. Before I turn it back over, if anyone wants our slideshow, afterwards just give us your email address and we'll make sure you get everything. So I know we tend to fly, but if you want the presentation, we're happy to share it with you. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, mindfulness in practice. There are a couple of practices that I think will be easy for you to learn if you want to learn this. And I shouldn't say easy because nothing in life is easy. But there's mindful breathing, and that's where most meditative practices start. There's mindful eating, there's mindful walking, there's candle meditation. But here's the thing that I need to say to you before we really advance into this mindfulness stuff. Number one, I always start with the bad news, and then I go to the good news. It's not good practice to start with the good news and say, okay, here's the bad news. So here's the bad news. The bad news is that mindfulness meditation is something that is not an instant fix. And many people who are chemically dependent, they're used to a substance that is going to give them an immediate kick. It's not going to happen. That's why if you're going to teach mindfulness to your patients, you need to remind them that this is a very different experience than what they're used to. Imagine if you sold somebody, God forbid, a drug on the street, and you said, listen, this is a great drug. In 30 days, come back to me because it takes effect in 30 days. You're going to feel good for 1 hour. The person would look at you and say, are you crazy? I'm not going to wait 30 days for a high. No way. In mindfulness practice, because there is a very serious neuroplastic change taking place, it takes about 30 days for the brain to accommodate to mindfulness practice and for the brain to change. So that's the bad news. The good news is that things will happen, but here's the deal. Number one, there are two types of practices that you need to be aware of. One is what we call formal practice. Formal practice is sitting, standing, or even lying down in what we call a dignified position. And the other thing in terms of mindfulness is that, well, how long do you have to sit and do breathing or whatever you're going to do. Well, John Kabat-Zinn says that a person should be practicing 45 minutes every day. Now, here's the problem with that. Most people don't want to give 45 minutes a day. They won't do it. What I do with my patients, with the people that I work with, is I start them out with 5 minutes a day. Can you do 5 minutes? Most people can do 5 minutes. If they tell you they can't, they're probably lying. Or, I don't know, I do believe that if it's for something that's healthy and helpful, who can't give 5 minutes a day? So, one of the reasons that people don't give the 5 minutes a day is not because they don't have the time. The issue is they want to see instant results, and the other thing is we all have what is known as, or what is called, monkey mind. We've got a lot of chatter going on in our heads. And when you start mindfulness practice, and even now I've been doing this for a while now, I still get chatter. It still goes on. And what you have to do is you have to just acknowledge that there is chatter going on in your head. You accept it with equanimity, that's calmness, and you don't try to push it out. You just see it as, let's say, a floating cloud. So that is the formal practice. I start with 5 minutes. I'm doing, because this is what I'm comfortable with, I'm doing 30 minutes every day, 7 days a week. And it's made a big difference. Here's the other thing that you're going to teach clients to do. Informally, they bring their intention, and that's an important word, to whatever experience that they're dealing with. So in other words, if they're facing a difficult day, then you might ask them, if they're practicing, to bring their intention to notice the difficult moment in that day that they're going to face. Now, here's the deal. Mindfulness is not about making it better. It's about accepting what is. I think that's a big word in mindfulness. It's acceptance and more acceptance and more acceptance. What people sometimes misunderstand, even though it is relaxing and you feel better, that's not the purpose of mindfulness. The purpose of mindfulness, I think, is to accept what's going on in the moment, good or bad. And it helps us to respond instead of reacting. And people who are chemically dependent, they're reacting more than responding because their brains are wired a little bit differently. So let me give you an example of responding versus reacting and how mindfulness helped me. Well, a couple of months ago, my wife was in the shower and I had to get going. It was approaching 8:30 and my first client was coming. And here I am, I'm thinking, come on, it's taking too long, come on. And I wanted to react at first and knock on the door and say, please get out because I gotta get in. And I decided that I wouldn't do that. As a matter of fact, I decided that I would bring compassion for my wife at that moment, okay? That was my intention. I'm not gonna say anything, I'm not gonna make her feel bad. I'm just going to accept that I'm uncomfortable right now and that's it. So my wife gets out and she looks at me and she says, how is my wonderful husband today? And I said, boy, I almost blew that one. Because imagine if I was knocking on the door and said, it's enough already, get out, get out. I didn't do that. And it taught me a very powerful, lesson. That lesson is, better to respond to life than to react to things. Mindfulness helped me to do that. I was still pissed off, I was still annoyed, I was still angry it didn't change the reality that, hey, in 10 minutes, I got to get ready, I have a patient coming. But what it did is it changed the outcome of what could have been a very unpleasant experience. So again, if you're going to teach this to yourself or to your clients or patients, what you have to do, number one, is you have to help them to establish a formal practice, even if it's just 5 minutes a day. And then what you do is you help them to bring the mindful experience to things that might be difficult for them. What they're used to is, oh, I can't handle that. What drug can I use that will help me handle this experience? So this is what you are replacing so that they're not turning back to the drugs. By the way, how many people work in rehabs? In rehab, are you teaching mindfulness? Yeah, so it's something that is being taught in rehab. So what I want to do is, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague again. What I want to do is give you a very brief mindfulness breathing experience. It's going to take maybe 5 minutes. And then what I want to do is show you how you can bring just simple breathing to help people deal with life differently. And I will tell you why this works and how it works in a few moments. So, if what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to kind of step down a little bit. The first thing I like, you can do mindfulness with your eyes open or closed. I usually ask people to close their eyes because, that's how I make my money. I go through their pocketbooks and they don't know the difference. They're in such, no, just kidding. I promise you I will not do that. So what I'd like you to do is close your eyes, because what that does basically is it filters out some of the stimulation, and it makes it easier for you to go into a mindful state. So, just breathe. Usually we start on the in-breath, in other words, inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. One of the things that we do in mindfulness practice is to teach people to recognize the difference between the top of their breath, meaning when you can't breathe in and you have to start breathing out, that is that brief moment, that's top of your breath. Bottom of your breath would be when you exhale and you can no longer exhale, you have to start breathing in. So what I'm going to ask you to do is be aware of the inhalation as opposed to the exhalation. If thoughts come to mind, that's okay. Again, don't fight the thoughts, just recognize them, welcome them, even if they are not such good thoughts. Welcome them as friends. What I do when I'm teaching my clients how to do mindfulness, the other thing that I do is I do what we call ratio breathing. And here's how we do it. Just follow my instructions. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, and 3. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's do one more set of that. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, and 3. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what I'd like you to do now is just stay with breath awareness. And when you're ready, just cover your eyes, open your eyes when you're ready, and remove your hand from your eyes, letting back in the stimulation. Okay, great. Let me ask one question. Was anybody bothered by breathing? Did anybody find it a little bit freaky or scary? Okay, well, I can use last year's experience. About 3 people said, what about if you got anxious when you're breathing? Okay, my answer last year was just hold your breath, don't breathe for as long as you can. That wasn't a very satisfactory answer for obvious reasons. But in all truth, there are people that are very uncomfortable with their breath and with breath awareness. So here's what we teach people to do. This comes from trauma. This is a trauma-focused activity. So people who have experienced trauma, this is what we tell them that they can do. Some people, you don't want them to go inside, because if they go inside, what happens is it's a very scary world inside of them, especially people who have experienced trauma. So what we do is we teach them, and you can look this up, you can get a lot of information online about what I'm going to say next. It's called grounding techniques, okay? So there are 3 mindful grounding techniques that are very useful for people with trauma. I'm dealing with a woman now who, when she closes her eyes, she feels that she is being overcome by the devil, that the devil is going to consume her, kill her, whatever. So if I teach her breathing, I have, but it makes her very uncomfortable. In other words, if she's sitting there and she's doing focused awareness, that's what breathing is all about, she becomes very uncomfortable. So here's what I do with her. Once upon a time, not too long ago, about 3 months ago, she comes into my office. I could see in her face she was absolutely distressed, she was anxious, she was depressed. And I said to her, I'm going to call her Susan. I call everybody Susan. Sometimes I even call my wife Susan. Her name is Karen. She begins to wonder, what's with this Susan? Are you doing something on the side that I don't know about? No, it's just every time I use an example to my class, for my class, I use the name Susan. So, Susan comes in. I see her very distraught. I say to Susan, listen, we're going to do something different today. Before we start the session, I'm going to have you do what we call some grounding techniques. I want you to walk mindfully. Here's how you're going to walk. You're going to walk. You're going to notice you're walking. Notice every step. But while you're walking, I live in a nice neighborhood, so there's lots of trees and there's lots of birds and all kinds of things. I want you to notice the flowers. I want you to notice the birds. I want you to notice everything that your sensory intake can experience. She did that. She walked around the block, and when she came back, she says, gee, Dr. G, I feel wonderful. It's amazing from coming in about to cry, about to, excuse the expression, freak out. She says, now I feel good. I said, great, now we can do some work. And now she's learning how to ground when she gets these horrible thoughts. Here's another grounding experience. Walking is a very good one. And by the way, if you go on the website, you are going to see at least 20 different grounding experiences. You pick the one that works best for your client. Another one, which actually they just taught her Tuesday. So it's, Tuesday, today's Wednesday, Tuesday, yesterday, is mindful eating. And I gave her and her husband a piece of chocolate, and I said, you're going to experience this chocolate much differently than you've ever experienced a piece of chocolate before. Okay, it was a chocolate raisin. I said, you're not going to eat this right away, and I'm not giving you more than one. She said, what fun is that? I said, it's not about having fun. It's about helping you to deal with these very traumatic feelings that you have, or these very unpleasant sensory feelings that you have, emotional feelings that you have. So this is what it's about. So I asked her to look at the raisin. I asked her to touch it. I asked her to think about how this raisin came to her hand, all the steps, and then put it in your mouth. Don't swallow it, just kind of let it swish around your mouth. And the experience took about 20 minutes. And she says to me, I've never had an experience like that before. And as a matter of fact, what she said to me is, even when I eat, I wolf down my food. I've never considered eating more mindfully. Now, I didn't say go out and eat every meal mindfully, because I know that's doomed for failure. What I did say to her is, take one meal a week. Okay, put your intention, one meal a week, just one meal, because people can do that. You never want to discourage people by giving them too much to do, because then they give up and they won't do anything. One meal a week, you're going to sit there and let it be a light meal, and you're going to eat mindfully. And what I'm teaching her how to do is eat mindfully, walk mindfully. Her husband is doing it with her. And what I am finding is that her anxiety level is actually being reduced. The bad thoughts that she's having is also being reduced. You know what her two addictions are? And that's coming down to? She's a gambler. She gambles because, and she doesn't go to Atlantic City to gamble. She'll buy $500 worth of scratch-off tickets at a shop. She spent more on scratch-offs than she's actually won. One day she came in to me and she says, Dr. G, you'll be so happy. What happened? I thought we were going to make some progress. She says, I won $500. I said, wonderful. How much did you spend to get that $500? Well, I wish you wouldn't have asked. It cost me $1,000 to get the $500. Figure out the math. That's not a good ratio. So she stopped doing it, okay? Her other addiction is, and we're not really talking about this today, is nicotine. She smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day. She is now down to a pack. And somehow I'm trying to convince her to go all the way and to get all the aids that she needs to stop smoking. My feeling is that grounding and some of these exercises, these mindfulness exercises, will be helpful to her. So I'll turn it back to you. Oh, okay. So there's also candle meditation. The purpose of this meditation is to increase visual awareness in the moment. By the way, I do have a mindfulness group that meets on Wednesdays, not today. And the good thing about the candle meditation, again, your awareness is outside, not inside. And it's very interesting to see a candle burning. If you have a candle burning, you probably just say, oh, that's a candle burning. But when you experience it mindfully, you see the beautiful colors of the flame. You begin to see the flame dancing and flickering. And it's really, it's a movement. And from a physics perspective, it's not just a random movement. It actually speaks a particular language. I don't know what that language is, but it's certainly beautiful to watch. The benefit of candle meditation is that it grounds a person into their environment. One challenge for many is that they tend to focus inward, which I said before. Grounding exercises takes the narrative and the focus is on the outside instead of the inside. When you're working with trauma, when you're working with people who have difficulty focusing on breath awareness, that's the best way to take them.
At this point forward, we're going to give you practical exercises that you can use with your clients or patients in terms of mindfulness, self-compassion. All of the prior exercises are traditional mindfulness. When we look at Christopher Germer and Kristen Neff's work, there's all about mindfulness, self-compassion. And I want to bring us back to the keynote. The keynote says so many beautiful pearls of wisdom. And he talked about this concept of learned voicelessness. Before today, I'm like, I know learned helplessness. What the hell is this learned voicelessness? But it makes sense that we have individuals who do not have the capacity to express their experience. They don't have the capacity to express their marginalization. What this does, as you will see, is it gives many different ways to be in the moment, but also gives a voice to the voicelessness. The other thing that is also powerful, the keynote talked about rage, right? And he gave a whole series of steps that were important. And one of the pieces that the keynote talked about is making a space for that rage, right? Name, claim, and then tame. What I believe is that Germer and Neff's work allow us to tame the beast.
By the way, before you go on, what I'd like you to do when you get home, because I think it's very valuable, Christopher Germer and Christine Neff, they both have websites, and you should go into the website, it's free, and they have all kinds of things that you can pull out on PDF, information about doing compassion training. They actually have a YouTube, so you can utilize that. So it's Christopher Germer and Christine Neff. I know Chris Germer is a Harvard psychologist. He's a professor, obviously. And Chris Neff is also a professor. I'm just not sure what school she's from.
Thank you. In terms of this model, we are going to be working with people's thoughts, emotions, behaviors. Right? This is what we do in psychotherapy. But it's about being aware of these. Now, if you look at it, we talked about mindfulness. What about compassion and self-compassion? We haven't defined what compassion and self-compassion reflect. Compassion is the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. Most of us as clinicians, we're driven by compassion. And we have the capacity for compassion, and that fuels and fills us when we're doing our work. What about self-compassion? Self-compassion is the application of compassion to ourselves. I just want to share a story that I'm guilty of not always doing this. I wanted to hear the keynote so badly that I came in early. the keynote address started, and then I had to use the bathroom. That's a problem. Because I know physically I'm supposed to take care of myself, right? At the same time, the keynote was so awesome. That's my clinical diagnosis of the keynote. It was so awesome that I didn't want to leave. And I put myself to the back burner, right? So this is all about self-compassion. And what's going to happen, as I mentioned, is we're going to go through a series of exercises. And we're going to go back and forth in no particular order. And we're going to talk about some of Germer and Neff's exercises. Here's just a few of them. As Dr. Garfinkel said, if you go on Neff's website, there's several dozen exercises you can do. Not only that, there are meditations that they have audio that you can play. Some are 10 minutes, some are 15 minutes, some are a little bit shorter, that help give guided meditations which are helpful. So the ones that we have up here we're going to focus on. But it's important to understand that this is not an all-inclusive or exhaustive list. So let's start. So a self-compassion break. You know, I heard Neff speak once, and her work came from her own experience, right? And the insight that stood out was that problems will occur. We're going to have issues. We're going to have distressing experiences. It's unavoidable. It's what we do with this distress that's important. And the first idea or intervention that we're going to talk about is a self-compassion break. How many of you have heard of a self-compassion break? This is not just for our clients. This is for us too. I've done this, where I've heard such heavy narratives, sometimes traumas that are unbearable. And I couldn't just turn it off and go to my next client. So how do I move on with all of this information I just heard? It's not easy. So one of the things that I recommend, if you need 5 to 10 minutes, tell your client, I'll be right with you. I just need 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Take a quick walk. Do some of these breathing exercises. Recharge. Reset the system for yourself. Right? So, in terms of a self-compassion break, one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, where do you feel this distress? Start to do that body scan work. Figure out, where are you feeling it, right? And we're going to do this with our patients, and we're going to try and get them in touch with where they carry their distress, where they carry their pain. So ask them, where do you feel it the most? And try and make contact with the sensations as they arise in your body. Right? Now, during this self-compassion break, we need to create a new narrative. So, say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. As I mentioned to you, suffering is unavoidable. Some of us will have more than others, but we will all suffer as long as we're alive. So, we could say to ourselves, this is a moment of suffering. In the rabbinical literature, we say, this too shall pass. Right? That comes from King Solomon. It will pass. But also say, this hurts. Ouch. I'm feeling this. This is tough. When we're talking to a patient or a client who has run-ins with the law, they just went to jail, came out of jail. That's tough. Allow them the space to feel that it's tough. As I mentioned, suffering is a part of living As long as we're here, we're going to suffer. But the reality is that we're not alone. We may feel alone, but we're not alone. Other people are going through similar things that we do. Those of you in treatment facilities, that is the power of group work. Having these groups gives other individuals experience that, you know what, I'm not suffering alone, right? And telling yourself that we're going to struggle, but we're going to get through it. And I know that we're going to talk about breath awareness and whatnot, putting your hand over your heart, but that will come back. Now, the last piece, before you go back, ask yourself, can I accept myself as I am? Can I forgive myself? Can I love myself? May I be safe? These kinds of questions allow us to go back. And I always say, until the answer is yes, stay on that break. You don't have to go back until you feel that you're safe and readily and mentally prepared to go back. Okay. You want to do soothing touch? Sure.
Okay. Okay, I can stand behind the podium, but I feel more connected to everybody when I'm kind of down here. I hope you don't get too anxious with me being, down here, but if you do, just tell me, yell at me, I'll get up there again. Okay, soothing touch. What you can do is you can actually put your hand over your heart as one methodology of doing this. You can touch your face, and the idea behind this is that when you are touching yourself in a very gentle way, basically you are releasing a hormone naturally, oxytocin. Oxytocin is what we call the love hormone. You release oxytocin when you see somebody that you like and you say, wow, this person really sends me to the, out of the universe. Well, guess what? You're going to be secreting oxytocin. But let me give you the Chris Germer's formula. What I've done for myself in my own mindfulness practice and with my patients, I do a modified version of this. Can you stand up again? And this time you don't have to close your eyes, okay? What I'd like you to do is put your hand over your heart, and Chris Germer also says that you can, if you want to gently massage it, that's fine. If you feel uncomfortable doing that, you can, gently massage your face. That's bringing out the oxytocin. And his formula is this: may I be healthy, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. In other words, what it's doing is you are now exercising having compassion for self. May I be healthy, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. My contribution to it, and this is what I teach my group, is I ask people with the third word, is to pick something that is meaningful for them. So for today, a little anxious about doing this, even though I'm a seasoned speaker, still anxious. I'm sure our first speaker was a little bit anxious. You don't know your audience, you want it to go well, and all that kind of good stuff. So what I did today is I said, may I be healthy, may I be happy, may I be focused, and may I be free from suffering. So what I'd like you to do now is you could either think it or you can say it out loud, it's very gently. I usually think it, but sometimes when I feel that I need more compassion to myself, I whisper it to myself, okay? So let's do it together. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering. I was hoping that on the third one you would add your own whatever. Okay. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering. Okay, let's do it one more time so that you can add whatever you want to add, that's meaningful for you today. May I be healthy. May I be happy. You choose. May I be focused for myself. May I be free from suffering. Now, that may sound, you can sit down now. Unless you enjoy it so much, you want to keep standing. I'm not going to stop you. But what it does is it teaches people how to be more gentle to themselves, because as you know, many addicts suffer from low self-esteem. They have tremendous rage. And the art of compassion, remember this, you can't have compassion unless you have compassion for self first. Try it. You can't have compassion unless you have compassion for yourself first. Okay? And that's what we usually find. So, that's why, and I explain to people, and by the way, so this doesn't look like some kooky new age kind of situation. What I usually do is I explain to people what they specifically are going to get from the exercise, because otherwise it's like, this is silly, this is kooky, this is ridiculous. So I explain it. And again, by the way, in order to develop new neurons in your brain, it takes about 30 days for the neurons to rewire differently. In the left frontal lobe area, this is what we find by people who meditate regularly. They have more left frontal lobe development, and that means that people that have left frontal lobe development, these are people that are calmer. These are people that are found to be happier in general. So I explain to my patients the neuroscience behind it, that this isn't hocus pocus, and it needs practice. Because if you don't practice, it's not going to be very effective. That's the drawback. I constantly tell people, yes, it's difficult, but anything worthwhile in life is usually difficult. That's why I start people off with 5 minutes, because 5 minutes is a lot easier than what John Kabat-Zinn says. Start them out with 45 minutes. And there is somebody else, I forgot her name, a psychiatrist out of Beth Israel in Boston, who encourages her patients to do mindfulness 45 minutes in the morning and 45 minutes in the evening. And I say to her, good luck to you if you can find any people that are willing to do that. But again, I do believe that people can start with 5 minutes. They can build up if they're motivated enough. And I constantly remind people, it's practice, practice, practice. And that is going to make all the difference in the world. I know it because you're talking to somebody, it makes a difference to me and how I feel. And I am somebody who suffered from very severe anxiety, depression, and panic disorder. And I am completely free of all three of those situations. Not necessarily because of mindfulness, but mindfulness when I still get one of those days where I feel, I think it's coming on, panic attack. I just accept it with equanimity. I breathe into it very easily. It's going in a second. And guess what? I'll tell you this. I have had those kind of attacks when I teach, and it doesn't bother me in the least. I handle it mindfully. practice.
What Dr. Garfinkel mentioned about oxytocin, touch, soothing touch, here's a larger list of ways that you can activate the release of oxytocin. Oxytocin is an interesting molecule. Oxytocin is released in many other ways. If you're interested in a great read, Paul Zak, Z-A-K, talks about the moral molecule. So oxytocin is released during morality. There's great research on oxytocin and meditation. Its application here as well, to some degree. During nursing, there's a release of oxytocin. During lovemaking or sex, your choice. And doing acts of altruism. Can you think of what all these things have in common? What do they all have in common? They make you feel good. That's true. Giving to others. So it's self in relation to the environment. There's some level of bonding and connectedness to the environment or another person.
By the way, the other thing I want to add to what Dr. Kaplan was saying, the other thing that releases oxytocin is becoming a really big thing is pets. People that have pets and they love their pets. As a matter of fact, I had a woman come into my office yesterday in tears because her dog has diabetes and she thought that the dog was having a different problem. Thank goodness it was only a urinary infection, which was not that serious and not necessarily a complication of diabetes. And she spent $600 to take the dog to the vet. She says, Dr. G, best $600 I ever spent. And I said, God bless. She loves that animal. Can I say more than her husband? Well, that's the secret that I keep. You know, she says, I got to tell you a secret. I said, uh-oh, what am I going to hear today? I love this dog more than my husband. Okay, I promise never to tell him.
That's intuitive, actually. We love our children more than our spouse many times too, and pets are another child for many. I'll do the next two if that's okay.
Sure.
Time is flying by. I didn't realize how fast this would go. Self-compassion in daily life. So mindfulness self-compassion, again, it's knowing when you're under stress, knowing when you're suffering, and responding with kindness to oneself. Now, in daily life, I actually want to draw attention to individuals who have suicidal ideations for this one. This is so helpful, this next intervention, for individuals with suicidal ideation. Because how will you be comforted? This is what it's all about. Finding strategies to be comforted. We don't need to wait until someone's in our office saying I am suicidal for us to practice self-compassion in daily life. Figure out what activates you. Figure out when you're under distress. Solve it before it becomes an issue. So let's talk about that. So when we talk about the domains, Chris Germer talks about physical domains, so softening the body. So I'm actually going to pose these, at least the first one, as questions to you to think about. Perhaps you can give me some answers as well. How do you care for yourself physically? What are some physical things that you could do to show self-compassion or self-soothe, perhaps? Anyone have any ideas of physical things you could do? Exercise is great. That's wonderful. By the way, talk about another molecule release. Endorphins are released. Endorphin, endogenous morphine. You don't need to get high when you exercise. You get the same drug for free. So, exercise. What else?
Sing.
What?
Sing.
Singing. So we could say singing. What else? Self-massage, or hell, go to the spa, right? Unless there's a sex addiction, maybe that might be something to think about. So, self-massage, other massage, warm baths, right? Whenever I am stressed, I carry my stress in my back. So for me, I know whenever I get too stressed, I need to take a nice warm bath, and it feels great. Now, there are many others, so that these are actual questions you would ask of your client. So when I'm putting it there, can you think of new ways to release tension and the stress that builds up in your body? Constantly thinking of new, more creative, because just like what we're saying, this is not an exhaustive list. There are many other things you could do. How about mentally? How do you care for your mind when you're under stress? Anyone have any ideas for that? Music is great. Watching a comedy, right? My favorite comedian is George Carlin. Exceedingly cerebral, and I love the fact that he has a counterculture element to that too. Go for it. Sleep. Sleep? Okay, shutting down. You know, sometimes we don't have the liberty to go to sleep, but yeah, sleep is great. How about a movie? Right? These things help us mentally reset. Emotionally, how do you care for yourself emotionally? What are some strategies you might use? Journaling is actually their example. Journaling is great. When we work with individuals in 12-step programs, we have them journal. And journaling is very powerful in terms of an emotional self-compassion in daily life. Dr. Garfinkel mentioned pets and the release of oxytocin. Pets can soothe us. Relationally. What about relationally? So, how do we relate to others that bring you happiness? There you go. That's what's up. Right? Sex is a great example. Laughing. But what's activating the laughter? It has to be an interpersonal. Oh, going out for coffee and just laughing, reminiscing. If I don't hear from one of my friends in about a week, I know something's going on with him. Actually, just yesterday, I sent him a text. Said, hey, what's up? And you know what he said? I'm under a lot of stress. And I knew that. So I knew that it was my role as a friend who cares to step up. So that's a interpersonal one. How about spirituality? Right? What can you do for yourself spiritually? Prayer, that's right. Anything else? Meditation? Going into nature. I love traveling because nature is one of those things where you can see the awesomeness. If you want to have a spiritual experience, stand at the bottom of the Swiss Alps and just look up. Take in nature, and you will realize how small you are, and there's something greater than you. And you're comforted by the experience of there being something greater than the self. Right? So going into nature, doing a nature walk, going out to the beach, listening to the waves. Now you're like, are these spiritual experiences? They can be. They very well can be. Okay, the next one I'll do, and then I'll turn it back over, is a compassionate letter to myself. Anyone ever write a letter to themselves? Okay, you did. I had this experience, but it wasn't like a self-compassion letter. It was in school where I had to write a letter to myself where I want to be in X amount of years. I don't even remember how long it was. And I mailed it, and I got it, and I was supposed to wait and open it up and see where I was at. Right? I don't remember. Yeah, but the idea is writing that letter. So we're going to have distress. We're going to disappoint ourselves. We're going to disappoint other people. Can we forgive ourselves? Right? can we write an endearing letter to ourselves embracing who we are? So that's tough, right? Isn't it tough to write a letter to oneself? Dear self, I love you. It's okay that you didn't get the promotion that you wanted. You're going to be okay anyway because you have a lot of talent. So how do you write a letter like that to yourself? Number one is it's almost you have to detach yourself. Imagine that you had a buddy who sees you in ways that you don't see yourself. And they see all your strengths, and they see all your weaknesses, and they've experienced this event with you. What would they say to you? When you're writing this letter, it's from that vantage point that it's a powerful letter. It takes us out of ourselves. It takes us out of the guilt, the shame, the disappointment, the pain. It takes us out of that with the other person. So some people are still stuck. They're like, gee, I don't know how to do that. I think I went ahead of myself. How do you do it if a person can't get out of themselves? You ask them to write a letter to one of their friends, right? And play the role, right, that we were asking the other person to play for us. Now you're writing the letter to another person. And then once you write that letter to another person, because we're infinitely more forgiving to other people, particularly individuals with substance use disorders, they can be more forgiving to others, much more than themselves. We're our biggest critic, right? So getting them to imagine that they're writing the letter to another person can be very powerful. And then once they write that letter, say, you know what? Treat it as it was you. So I'm going to turn it back over.
Okay. Since we're running out of time, can we get to the gratitude?
We have till 1:15?
Yes.
Like we saw.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the sense and savor walk. The goal of the walk is to notice as many pleasurable things as possible, slowly, one after another, using all your senses, sight, smell, sound, and touch. Maybe even taste. Not sure about that one, but, Chris Germer, I don't know how you can taste the walk, but, actually we can. I'll tell you how. If you're passing, let's say, a strawberry bush or something, but, according to mindfulness practice, it comes from the Buddhist tradition, although the kind of mindfulness that I practice is very stripped of any religious symbolism or orientation. But the one thing that the Buddhists do believe very heavily is right action. So if you pass a tree and you say, wow, wonderful apple, I think I'm going to pick that apple and savor the taste. Bad thing, unless you have permission to pick that apple, you shouldn't pick that apple. So, how many happy, beautiful, or inspiring things can you notice while you're walking? You'd be surprised when I had my group do mindful walking. When you're just walking mindlessly, when you're on what we call automatic pilot, it's amazing how much you miss. You miss a lot of life when you're on automatic pilot. When you are walking with a sense and savor walk, a mindful walk, people start to notice different things. They notice the fresh air. They notice the sun. They notice a beautiful leaf, the shape of a stone, a smiling face, the song of a bird, the feeling of the earth under your feet. One of the things that I noticed when I started to walk mindfully, and this kind of blew my mind, if you look at my sidewalk, they're filled with little pebbles. And the other thing with mindfulness practices is we want to explore the good thing about mindfulness is it encourages curiosity and it encourages beginner's mind and it encourages us to laugh a lot. Beginner's mind, when you start to see something like you've never seen it before. So I said, wow, look at all these pebbles. I started to count them. And when I started to do some mindfulness at college, if you notice the tile in front of you, notice these little dots here, whatever you want to call them. Most of us probably didn't pay attention to it until now when I'm pointing it out to you, or that crack over there. Wouldn't notice it when you are on automatic pilot. But what I am fascinated by is I wonder in each square how many of these little dots, whatever you want to call them, there are. And when I was doing mindfulness at the college, I wasn't leading it, somebody else was leading it. I started to count the dots and I said, wow, I never would imagine so many dots, on the floor within a square inch. There must be literally not thousands, but millions. And then I was almost tempted to do something mathematically to kind of get an approximation and then go to each floor in the college and say, wow, there are a billion of these little things here. How wonderful is that? Do you see how it's making me happy? Like a little kid. Because, by the way, if you know anything about the Dalai Lama is laughing whenever possible. He is always laughing. And he looks at the silliness of life. He has learned how to laugh at himself and laugh at the things that, to us, we take too seriously. One of the things that happens in the addictive process, for people who are depressed, anxious, they become humor impaired. What mindfulness can do is help people repair that and appreciate the humor. I encourage my mindfulness group, we laugh. When we're doing exercise, we laugh. When we're doing mindfulness exercises together, one thing that happens when you're doing focus awareness of breath, you start to hear people's stomachs grumble. And people laugh, and it's funny. Nobody's self-conscious about it. Imagine if you were doing it without compassion. You're saying, God, that stomach of mine. I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe it. They're hearing my stomach grumble. Should I leave the room? Should I stay in the room? What the hell should I do? And I always tell people, it's great that your stomach is rumbling. And then what has happened, I don't know if this is, Dan, you can tell me, if this has something to do with mirror neurons. Now 5 people, when we do it, their stomachs are rumbling. So we have a concert of rumbling stomachs when we do mindfulness practice. It's just wonderful.
What time is your mindfulness?
Oh, you want to come?
No, the idea is that might be the grumbling.
Oh, the grumbling, I get it. From 3 to 5 on Wednesdays, with the exception of today. Stomach shouldn't grumble at that time. But these are the things that if you bring to people's awareness and you do it mindfully, it becomes so pleasurable. One of the things that has happened to me from a mindfulness perspective is I start to enjoy little things. I start to enjoy, I have grandchildren, I have 4 of them, and I enjoy them so much better when I can be mindful with them. Before mindfulness, it would be like, okay, they're coming for the day. I can tolerate that. I can deal with that. And then after an hour, I would say, Karen, it's my wife's name, can you take over here, and I get all like, thank God. Now, I'm really entrained with the situation. I love when they come over. I spend time with them. I am mindful with them. And it's just a wonderful experience. I make faces, my son is not happy. You're teaching my daughter bad things. She's making faces at me. I said, okay, so what? I don't take it personally. So I'm teaching my son not to take my granddaughter's face. She's only 4 years old, not to take it so personally. But these are the things that you can enjoy. And I propose to you that people who are chemically dependent, who are in recovery, also have to recover from the idea that life is multifaceted. You can laugh, you can notice silly things, small things. You can exercise the child inside of you. This is the mindful path. This is the mindful approach. So, where are we? Okay. Do you want to do this one? You can do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so let's move this along. So the next thing we're going to do is soften, soothe, allow, then forgiveness, forgiving others, forgiving oneself, and then I'll get into something that I'm suggesting also as a form of mindfulness and self-compassion with this gratitude list. I'm extending it beyond that. So soften, soothe, allow. What happens when we get tense? What happens when there's distress, trauma? We carry that. So this is an exercise that you would actually tell the individual this script. You would guide them through this. So you would say, begin softening in a location in your body, letting your muscles become soft without a requirement that they become soft, like simply applying heat to sore muscles. Now, it's important to know that what you're doing is you're going gradually. You're taking them into this release of tension. So when we say allow your muscles to become soft without requiring it, we're going to treat it like a tender embrace, like you're holding yourself. Allow yourself to become flexible like a pancake, not needing to go all the way, right? So we're softening, and then you start to go through this process of soothing, right? Then you ask them to perhaps put their hand over their heart, which was an intervention we did earlier, right? And then allow whatever thoughts come to mind. May I hold myself in a loving awareness? And then you tell them gently, softly, soothing, soften, soothe, allow. And you do that repeatedly until the person releases that tension. And at that point, when you can see, because your job as you're taking them through it is to do a body scan, right? If you're doing this effectively, you're doing a body scan, you know when they're still tense. You know when they're not. So you want to keep 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long you need to, until that tension dissipates. And once they release that tension, that's when you guide them back out of that. So soften, soothe, allow. Can I ask you to advance it?
Sure.
Just hit spacebar. Buffering. Okay, so the next thing is forgiveness. And it's interesting that that letter we talked about, when distressing things happen, that and forgiveness go together. So some of these exercises go together. So we talk about the breath awareness, the soften, soothe, allow, the emotion awareness all go together. Your letter to the self and the forgiveness exercises can be used together. So let's talk about forgiving other people. Right? So you might ask a person to think about or conjure up some pain, because this is where it starts. Right? You want to draw their attention to a trauma or distressing experience. How did you feel? Right? Draw that out. Allow them to express that. You know, talk about the keynote again, feeling that rage. I felt enraged. How could my mother do this to me? Right? Getting upset or whatever it may be. Okay. Now we've activated something. That's good. What do we do? Where do we go from there? So we start to get them to think outside of the experience. Ask yourself, What may have contributed to that? Think about their lives, your mother's life. How did she grow up? Did she grow up in an addictive family? Right? Was she abused? Does that contribute to her abusing you? Right? Because when we see red, when we're in pain, the natural reaction is fight or flight. We're taking a person through this experience, but we're also not in that painful experience entirely, so we can free them from it. So ask yourself, what other factors played a role? You know, we didn't have very much growing up. Mom used to buy me shoes from Payless, and all my other friends had Jordans and Nikes. Well, what was the financial situation like? Helping your client, so forgiving others and forgiving yourself is helping your client develop insight. So this is more of an insight awareness exercise. Once you do that, once you get them to develop, figure out whether the financial stressors, early childhood problems, low self-esteem, cultural factors, diversity factors, right? These kind of factors play a role. Could that have influenced the way you were raised? And then you want to ask that person to think, may I begin to forgive you for what you've done? And this is the most beautiful thing that they put in there. Wittingly or unwittingly, that may have caused me harm. Right? Because sometimes we think the person did it on purpose. We think that they knew what they were doing. But that subjective reality thing we were talking about earlier, it's back. We need to check our assumptions. Now, does that mean that it wasn't painful or distressing? It doesn't change the pain or distressing experience, but it helps us forgive if we can start to see maybe they didn't know. Maybe it was accidental. I actually did one of these exercises with a colleague. We were going down to the train station, and someone bumped into them. And they were enraged. This person invaded my space. How dare they? Like, did they do it on purpose? Yeah, they did it on purpose. How do you know? Right? And the person couldn't give a reasonable answer. So if you don't have a reasonable answer that they did it on purpose, can you let it go? Can you forgive? That is the process that you would take a person through forgiving another individual. How about yourself? It's the same strategy. So perhaps I want to advance this a little bit faster. Thinking about your own pain, your own self-sabotage perhaps, your own disappointments. How did you contribute to your own situation, your distress? Ask yourself, think about the factors in your own life. Now it's no longer their life, it's your own life. What factors contributed to you self-sabotaging? Right? It's possible that you also didn't have effective modeling, right? With poor role models, you're going to incorporate a different sense of self or identity. And that's going to shape you. So you're just copying what you learned earlier. Can you forgive yourself for not being perfect? Can you let it go? Right? And then you want the person either to put this in writing or verbally to say, may I begin to forgive myself? Get them to say that. Can I forgive myself? And then what I like to hear is a yes or no. Are we there yet? Can you forgive yourself? Right? Because these checkouts, I call them checkouts, will let you know where the person is. If they say, no, I still can't forgive myself, your work continues. It may not occur in one session. It's a process. And when we talk about trauma, it's a major process.
I'm going to talk a little bit about gratitude, which, again, if you go through the mindfulness sources, there's a lot on gratitude. The way I incorporate this into my mindfulness practice, the last thing I do when I'm in my mindful state is I think about the day before, and I think about what I am grateful for the day before. And there's always something. As painful as life can be at times, there's always something. And what I have done actually is, if you're familiar with quantum physics, I call it quantum gratitude moments. I'll give you a good example of what a quantum gratitude moment is. When I started this practice, I looked at some of the things that I do when I get up. And not to gross anybody out, but I think most of us do this, is we go to the bathroom, okay? And when I was flushing the toilet, I said, wow, this is amazing. There are, listen to me folks, 1 billion people on this planet. 1 billion people that have no running water. They have no toilet facilities. 1 billion people. What they do is they either have to take a shovel and dig a little bit and do their business, or they have an outhouse. So here I am, flushing the toilet, and I'm thinking in terms of a quantum moment. So where does this go? And how is it, filtered into something that's useful? And then I think about all the people involved in the network underneath the street to get the toilet to flush and the sewer, to go into the sewer, it has to go somewhere, so on and so forth. And what it has done for me is it's given me tremendous appreciation for things I never thought about. I never thought about, you get up, you do your business, you flush the toilet, the end. So a little thing like flushing the toilet, if you want to make it into not only a mindful moment, but a gratitude moment, you begin to see the profound experience in gratitude. Now, the 3 people that you want to look toward if you want to do this. By the way, this comes not only from mindfulness, but from a system called positive psychology, Martin Seligman, and just recently, it came out about 2 weeks ago, there is now a book on mindfulness meditation and positive psychology, the intersection of mindfulness meditation and positive psychology. So, here's the 3 people that you might want to look at. And I must tell you this, I have my patients keep a gratitude journal. All they have to do is just write 1 entry into the journal. If you make it too fancy, they're not going to do it. So I just say to them, can you write 1 sentence before you go to bed, something that you're grateful for? You know what I discovered? This is amazing. Listen to me. This is about as bad as it can get. When I had people doing this, and they bring in a gratitude journal, one person, I remember very clearly, says, I'm grateful for my depression. I said, grateful for your depression? Okay, explain it, because maybe he is grateful. No, Dr. G, you don't understand. I can't think of anything I can be grateful about. My life is a lot of pain. Oh, okay. So I gave him some hints what he might want to do. He comes back the next week, and he comes in and he says, well, the only thing I can think of is my back problems. I said, how is that gratitude? You know what I realized? What I realized is that it was so foreign to him what gratitude is that he can't, it's not in his lexicon, it's not in his language. So what I had to redo is his language. I had to say, okay, I'm going to teach you a new language. Let's start. What's the first thing you do when you open your eyes in the morning? I don't know, I guess I get out of bed like everybody else does. Good. Let's start there. Show some gratitude in that act, the simple act of getting out of bed. Well, at least I can get out of bed You're right. I have a friend who is a quadriplegic. He's a psychologist in Staten Island. He can't get out of bed. Nothing below his neck works. Everything has to be done for him in order for him to survive. Gratitude can begin with a simple, I get out of bed and I can put my feet on the floor and I can propel myself to the bathroom. Never take that for granted. So what I do with my patients is I have them keep a very simple gratitude journal. Just yesterday, one of my patients says, I resisted this for a long time, and now I absolutely love it. Because when I have a bad day, like I had the other day, I go into my gratitude journal and I say, wow, I have a lot to be thankful about. Great. Then I've done my job. I do this in my gratitude practice, mindful practice. The last thing I do is, what am I grateful for? And every day I can come up with so many things, and again, I take it to its quantum maximum. Things that, if it's just chewing a piece of food, in order for you to chew food, you gotta have teeth. And in order for you to chew food, you've got to have an awareness that you're chewing food. Because believe it or not, if you were in a coma, God forbid, you'd either have a feeding tube inside of you, and so on and so forth. So, how does the food get to you? And all of this becomes what I call quantum gratification or gratitude. So, take 10 to 20 minutes developing a gratitude list. Add one new thing for at least a month. Rank order your list, things that you're most grateful for, things that you're less grateful for. And one more thing I want to say. The 3 people that you should be looking up that have done this in a experimental way. By the way, I no longer do feel-good therapy with my clients. It doesn't work. As a matter of fact, let me tell you this. Back in the 70s, what we used to tell our patients is, get a punching bag and punch that punching bag to hell, you're going to feel better. You know what research has said to us? If you do that, it just overstimulates you. You're going to become more angry. It doesn't do anything. Okay, so whatever I do, I make sure that it's grounded in research, good research, and then I can recommend it to my patients, and I tell them exactly where I'm coming from. So this doesn't become feel-good Mickey Mouse stuff. So the 3 people that you want to look up, if you really want to get a sense of their research. One is Tal Ben-Shahar, S-C-H-A-R, Tal Ben-Shahar. Got 3 or 4 books. You can have that on Amazon. He has it. Then there is Barbara Fredrickson, who also has done some studies on gratitude. And excuse me?
Can you repeat that name?
Yeah, Barbara Fredrickson. All these people are professors. I don't know what that means, but they do the research, I guess. And the last one is Sean Acher, A-C-H-E-R. And you might want to YouTube him. I heard him speak in the city about 2 or 3 years ago. He is an incredible speaker. He got the honor of being the best and most favorite professor at Harvard. And as a matter of fact, his classes run about 500 students in a lecture hall, and they have to turn students away. He is an incredible speaker who's written a couple of books. All of these have books out. So you can Google them up and get information there that will help you to help your clients or yourself to develop a gratitude journal. Let me just say one thing. I never ever suggest things to my clients that I'm not willing to do myself. So I do this so I can walk my clients or patients through the experience, and they are impressed. Wow, you do this too, Dr. Garfinkel? I absolutely do. Why would I give you something to do if I'm not doing it? I try to walk the talk as much as possible.
So this is actually a series of exercises that I tend to regularly do with individuals. The first one I robbed Martin Seligman for, right, the idea of the gratitude list. But again, mindfulness meditation, mindfulness self-compassion, it's all about rewriting our mental dialogue. It's all about helping people become happy. And gratitude is a mechanism that can help you become happy. Now, here's perhaps a novel definition of happiness. This is the way I conceptualize it. Happiness is not an emotion. Most of you think of happiness as being on the positive side of the emotion scale, right? That's what it's traditionally taught as. My understanding of happiness is a state of mind. So it's a cognitive experience in which you focus on the things that you have rather than the pursuit of the things that you do not have. I'll repeat that. Happiness is a state of mind in which you recognize or appreciate the things that you have as opposed to the pursuit of things that you do not have. I'll go back to an ancient proverb, no person dies with even half of their pleasures fulfilled, right? So the pursuit, and I'll put a face to it. Forgive me, Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, best golfer, or perhaps second best golfer of all time, and he had a remarkably beautiful wife, right? Supermodel. Now, in terms of supermodels, only 1 in 100,000 people could look that good. Put that into perspective. That's his wife. What happens?
Ex-wife.
Well, I'm going on the process. What happens? He becomes dissatisfied with a supermodel. Seeks outside. Perhaps he was putting around the green instead of a hole-in-one. Never mind. All right. Hey, watch it. PG crowd. All right. So he starts having extramarital affairs because he didn't appreciate that which he had. That resulted in a divorce, one of the largest settlements that I've seen, and he's never golfed the same. So had he recognized that which he had, that would be remarkable. So the first step, and I gave you this, and I think we're running out of time to the point where we can't do it in session. I wanted to do it, is to give you 10 minutes to write the things that you're grateful for. 10, 20 minutes. Is that an easy thing to do? Most people outside of the profession, we get this. Most people, when I say that, they're like, oh, that's easy. Well, if it's 20 minutes, the first 5 minutes, you're flying through it, right? I'm happy I have my eyes, I'm happy I have my ears, I'm happy I have this, I'm happy I have that. Next 5 minutes, it gets a little bit harder. Next 5 minutes, even harder. By the last 5 minutes, you're happy that you have lint in your belly button because you can't think of anything else. So that's the first step. Because I want to rewire the thought process of that which you have. But we don't stop there. Step 2, and I apologize, the number should say 1, 2, 3. Just saying. Step 2 is to add one new thing for a month. Why is that a beautiful adaptation? Why is that important? Anyone have an idea? It shows mindfulness, which is important. That's true.
Reinforces the practice of gratitude.
Reinforces the practice of gratitude, but I like the idea of a mindful awareness of all the things you have. Because you can't add a new thing unless you know what's already on your list. So you're constantly, for this month, reviewing and revisiting in a mindful way the things you have, and your eyes are wide open, you're no longer on autopilot, and you're trying to find something new. So I should stop there, right? No, I don't stop there. The third thing, the third piece, is after a month, and by the way, you can put this in your wallet, put this in your pocketbook, put this wherever, and you should do this. It's an eye-opening experience. You come in, and I say, we're going to do something different in this session. We're going to take this session, and we're going to rank order these things. Now, there are things that are easy to prioritize, right? So our hearing is certainly more valuable to us than our socks, right? But what if it was our vision and our hearing? Now, that's a hard one. Which one's more important? Many people can't conceptualize this. So you ask them the following question. If you had to give one of these two things away, which one would it be? And then at the end of this, when it's all rank ordered, you say the good thing is, you don't have to give any of this away. So, one last thing. Let's say a person puts, I'm happy because of my husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. And then they break up. Really, right? They're on the list. Relationships are important to us. What happens if you break up? You have a buffer. You tell that person, go back to your list. There are only 127 on the list. There are 126 things that are more valuable to you. And there's another person there right behind them. Isn't that interesting? Okay.
Okay, seeing that we have almost maxed out our time, it is always appropriate to ask if you have any questions, and certainly both of us are willing to entertain any questions. We actually had a few more slides.
Can I say one line or something? And then open up. I promise I'll finish the neurobiological piece in 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm timing
And
it.
you can time it.
So let's be present. Okay, so in terms of neurological research, Daniel Siegel, trauma expert, talks about interpersonal neurobiology. What? The brain on love. And this is really a starting point talking about how the brain can rewire itself in interpersonal ways, post-trauma, other things. And he talks about mindfulness as being an integrated brain. So the next thing I'll talk to you about is mindfulness meditation and dopamine. Why is dopamine important? That's where we started. The addiction circuit is based on dopamine. Mindfulness meditation, guess what? Increases dopamine levels. You don't need to activate your pleasure circuit with drugs and alcohol. Mindfulness will activate it. So we're taking something away, but we're giving you something back, right? So that's very important. So dopamine and nucleus accumbens is part of the hypothalamus. When we talk about gratitude, mindfulness, we see increased activity in nucleus accumbens, part of that mesolimbic dopamine system. And that's all I have, right? So let's start opening up questions.
By the way, you've been a wonderful audience. Nobody really walked out. You know, I'm a college professor. I'm used to students walking out. They're texting. They're doing a lot of things when they get bored. But you guys were wonderful. So, questions. Okay, I see this hand